This is my puppy. She's about 4 months old. She's very adorable. And she's my official stream mascot.
She is freaking adorable. Look at that.
Oh, she's awesome.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, episode 26. My good friend, Vanni Van, is here on the podcast, episode 26. Hey, Vanni, what's up?
How are you doing, Lat?
I'm good. How about yourself, man?
Good.
Do you say
well.
Vanni? Do you say Vanni? I've always, I can't believe I've never bothered to ask.
Well, okay, so if you want to
let's jump into
know
it.
how it's done and the reason why it is, so the screen name was one that I conceived several years ago, and it's an adaptation of a nickname, one of the many nicknames that we had for my son. His name is Giovanni.
Great name.
So it's essentially just the last part of his name, but Vanni Von was just one of the nicknames that we conceived for him.
Right.
So I just turned it into a screen name, and this is way before I thought I was ever going to be doing live streaming or anything like that.
Totally.
So I just rolled with it and was like, okay, this is how I'll be called here. And then when I would go into people's chats and say hello or whatever, be like, oh, hey, Vanni Van, what's up? And I'm like, actually, it's pronounced Vanni Von. And like the reactions I get, like, sorry. Okay, I guess I'll pronounce it right.
Yeah, right.
And so I'm like, yeah, thanks. And then after a few times, I was like, this actually is kind of DB behavior. So you know what? So I was like, I know it's just going to be like Sisyphus, just pushing the boulder uphill. It's always going to be an uphill fight. I was like, you know what? Why don't I lean into it? Why don't I steer into the skid? So as you can see, on that side behind me, I'm coming to you live from not the man cave, but the van cave, and a whole bunch of stuff was based around it being a van. Like my stream alerts when I started out were based on Chris Farley's Saturday Night Live character, Matt Foley, whose big old thing was talking about, living in a van down by the river,
Yes.
eating government cheese, smoking doobies. Yeah. So it was all that. It was so it was all themed around that, and then the whole van thing. It just kind of took off from there, and I've embraced it. So,
Well.
but those who know me, and those who are my good friends, my true friends, will refer to me as Vanni, and you know this.
I always go with Vanni, but then,
Yeah. No, that's right. That's
okay,
right.
because sometimes you're welcome aboard the van, and I hear van, I'm like, oh, is it? I should know. And I remember hearing the way you introduced yourself at Cali-thon. I was like, okay, you know what? Okay. So there we go. We have set the record straight, ladies and gentlemen. But apparently you've decided not to die on that sword. So if Vanni does come up, it's it's.
Oh yeah. No, it's fine.
It's cool.
It's fine.
Well, there's a couple of different reasons I wanted to get you on the podcast. One of them, obviously, is the Nutopia. I've got the Nutopia shirt. If you're seeing the video,
I love it.
We're all about the TurboGrafx 16, but also some of the you actually have done a bunch of interesting and diverse speed runs that we'll get to. Take us back to the beginning. Where did the whole where did you start playing video games? What was like your first console game? What was like the first intro into video games for you?
So my very first experience ever with video games, all right? And this is I'm gonna date myself just right off the bat. For some reason, one of my parents' friends during, I don't know if it was like my mom's like baby shower or just like as a gift or whatnot, but I was the firstborn of my parents, and they decided to give my parents as a gift for me being born an Atari 2600 video computer system.
Okay.
And so my very first memory of video games, I want to say I was no more than, I probably wasn't even 2 years old. I remember going into my dad's den, and he had his Atari 2600 hooked up to a Zenith TV. The screen was probably about like yay big, and it was black and white.
Oh yeah.
And he had it high up on a shelf because he didn't want his infant son to be messing with it. And I remember he was playing a game called Casino, where you could play like blackjack and five card draw and stuff like that. Obviously, it was very primitive being on the 2600. But I remember just sitting there in his lap, just watching him play. And something just clicked then, and I was like, oh, hey, this is cool. And then by the time I got an opportunity to get my hands on the controller myself, then it was, the rest is history. And so so my first console was an Atari 2600. I was a big fan of a lot of the Activision games, so like Pitfall, River Raid, Mega Mania, Chopper Command, Keystone Capers, things like that. Those were my big jam when I was growing up. Now, in addition to that, and I actually just found out that my parents still have this, and I want to find out if it still works. My dad has an Atari 5200. Which is
fancy.
Yeah, that was the one with like the controllers like this. It had like the keypad on the bottom,
gosh,
and
yes.
the buttons were like on the side. Yeah. A commercial failure, but still like an oddity when it comes to video games. He still has it, so I would love to get a hold of it. And God, if I could stream with that, that would be huge.
Did you ever play it? Because I have heard so many. I don't want to know if it's complaints, but I guess gripes. Concerns about the 5200 controller, that it was so odd and felt weird. But I've never actually used one. Is it really that bad? I don't know.
No, it is a little unwieldy. Like, you really have to like jam on some of the buttons to get them to work. But the big complaint about it is that those controllers wore down so quickly.
Oh, got it.
That it made using it for a prolonged amount of time prohibitive unless you were sinking a bunch of money into buying new controllers.
Gotcha.
So I think that for most people that are I guess like historians or collectors or whatnot, when it comes to that, that's their big gripe, is that the controllers are just are very fragile and not very durable. Yeah,
that's a good business plan for Atari. Just make controllers that wear out, and then you have to buy new ones.
You have to buy more. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So that's really cool. As a kid, what was like did you just love playing the games, or were you kind of person who liked to beat the games or play? I'm curious, like, what was kind of your approach to video games as a young lad?
So, I mean, obviously, with games on the Atari, they're pretty simple. Get the highest score, whatnot. But then once I got to the Nintendo era, and that's where I started to get... And obviously, there were a lot of games that I liked on there. I had a pretty diverse, palette when it came to the games. But the ones that really grabbed me were the role-playing games, the RPGs. With the exception of potentially Mega Man 2, the Nintendo game that I beat the most growing up was Final Fantasy. And think about how long it takes you to beat that game.
Yeah.
Right?
Holy cow.
I just played it over and over and over again just because I loved it so much. So, like, it really ingrained in me as a young boy. Though, I mean, playing, Final Fantasy, Dragon Warrior, games like that. Like, those were all games that I would just spend hours upon hours playing. Legend of Zelda, things like that. Just hours upon hours playing. And so for when it came to doing RPGs, that's something that I've always stuck. I mean, and that's where I have my deep-rooted. I mean, and you can see there. Whoops! God damn it! Over my right shoulder, all the Final Fantasy VI perlers, because that's one of my favorite video games, not RPGs, video games of all time. So. Yeah,
I think it's interesting as a kid finishing RPGs. So my first RPG experience was a game called Faxanadu on the NES.
Oh yeah,
and I couldn't. I guess I don't know. I don't know if my brothers and I couldn't sit still long enough to actually play through and beat the game. We loved the story. We loved all the different things you could customize on your characters and all these kind of things. But for some reason we couldn't get through it. And so I have like mad respect for people who were if you're 10 years old or 8 years old, or whatever, like sitting down or trying to actually beat a game. Like you mentioned Final Fantasy. I mean, that must have taken you like hours and hours and hours to actually complete that thing.
Oh yeah, no, a play. Well, I mean, I got to the point where I knew where everything was and what I need to do, what treasure chests to pick up, what not.
Right.
So, I mean, if I was really like, all right, if I'm going to sink some time into this, I could do a playthrough of it in, a handful of days.
Right.
And that game's grindy too.
Oh,
so
dude. For real,
so.
yeah, it's exactly. I mean, it's a combat thing. I'm glad you mentioned Final Fantasy VI being like one of your favorite games, just not like RPGs or Super Nintendo games. I didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up, so like going back into that library and playing Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI and all these games that are like it's surprising how well those games are holding up today. Like they are just as good as I mean, they're just as good as anything else that's out, in the indie market and all those kind of things today. I don't know if you've had that similar experience, discovering some of those games.
Well, that comment I think really speaks to the fact that the actual gameplay itself, as well as the story and the characters and whatnot, they don't need to be fancy. They don't need to be high definition. They don't need to be all this stuff. If you can find a way to make it fun and have people, because a lot of people that I know, especially in the circles that I run with, they personally connect with a lot of those RPG characters from games just like that. And when you do, you really have that deep-seated just love for a game like that because of just that unique feel that it can give you.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a big reason why they still hold up to this day, I mean, literally decades later.
Yeah, this is probably why all of us are still streaming and playing them and speedrunning them, but they hold up so damn well.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so tell us, when do you think, or how did you get into speedrunning, or what was, what's the journey? Were you watching first? Were you attempting things competitively, gaming? Curious how you got there.
So, this was several years ago. I remember I had a random conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about Mega Man 3. And so there was one day that I just went into YouTube, and this is when YouTube was still fairly new too. Went into YouTube and was just searching for Mega Man 3 stuff, and I saw a run of it from an Awesome Games Done Quick, and I was like, wait, what is this? Why is there an audience here for this? I was like, what? So I started watching it, and I was like, oh crap, this is a thing? and then from there, the rabbit hole just was deep and bottomless. And I just started looking at all this other stuff, and I discovered like RPG Limit Break and all these crazy streamers and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, I wish I would have known about this years ago, because this all seems really cool. So I wanted to get into streaming, but I looked at my setup, and my setup was my wife's MacBook, and I was like, this has some limitations. So I tried to do the best I could, and it wasn't working out. But I was like, you know what, let's just do this as a hobby. So actually, the very first game that I ever speedrun, I wasn't streaming any of this at the point. The very first game that I learned to speedrun for real was Super Metroid, because that game is just so phenomenal. It's just a masterpiece of a game, and as a speed game, obviously
Super
now.
Nintendo again.
Yeah, exactly. Now that it's just such an amazing speed game, and it's so popular. I mean, practically closed out. How many GDQs?
Yeah.
Anyway, so but I didn't really know any of the speed tricks, and I didn't obviously have save states or an emulator or anything like that. So I was just trying to play through, and my runs were pretty sloppy. But what I did, it was actually funny, is I used my son's iPad, and I used it just like in the Notes app. I kept like a journal, if you will, like talking about, well, first of all, I had the notes for my run, so okay, I go, so I knew the path to go. But then also, when I would complete a run, I would talk about the things that went well and where I screwed up and what I can improve and looking forward to doing in the future, kind of like chronicling and I don't know if I still have that. It would be interesting to see if I do. But yeah, so then I did that. I also did a couple of speed runs of Mario Kart 8, just like a 32 track.
Oh, cool. I've seen that. That's how you've submitted those runs. Those ones actually ended up getting submitted.
Those I don't think I have any videos for either.
Oh, dang. I thought I saw Mario Kart 8 on your speedrun profile. It might have been something else.
It is on my, like, in my Twitch bio, but I don't have any videos of that.
Got it. Okay.
So what really got me into wanting to do speedrunning and ultimately getting into the community, like I said, I discovered a lot of things through YouTube, and one of them was RPG Limit Break, which I'm sure we'll be talking about plenty later on. And we've already discussed my love of RPG, specifically Final Fantasy. And I would see all these speed runs of like platformers and things like that, and I was just like, man, it would be cool if speedrunning RPGs was a thing. But I was like, no, they're so long. Like, you're not going to be able to speedrun a game in like 20 hours. Like, what the hell is that?
What kind of speedrun is that?
And then I stumbled across a video of, I don't know if it was Limit Break. It might have actually been a Games Done Quick. It was Brosensha, and he was doing the Final Fantasy IV, what they called it Die Hard %, because he went up all the stairs. It's essentially what we now know as the no credits warp run. And I saw him do it in about, it was a GDQ. I saw him do it, I want to say he did it in about like 2.5 hours. And I was like, wow, that's a revelation. I could do it. You know what? I was doing, my speed runs of Metroid would take me like an hour and a half. I was what's an extra 45 minutes? Like, I can swing this. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn the no credits warp run for for Final Fantasy IV, and that was the first game that I started to really kind of dig into and practice. And then in the winter of, or like right around the beginning of 2017, the Final Fantasy community was holding, they were holding a tournament, a race tournament for what's called Paladin Percent, which is probably about like the first third or so of the game as far as the content goes. There's like a specific point where the main character turns into a paladin and you're done. A good run is right around or perhaps a little under 1 hour. And I was like, okay, I've already been learning the no credits warp run. So I know a lot of this stuff. I'm going to enter a tournament. Sure.
No big deal.
I literally had like 4 followers on my Twitch page at the time. And I was like, okay, what's Discord? All right, I guess I got to join this. Oh, is this like a forum? Like I was so new to like everything. Just completely green. And so, but when I came into the community, I was like, "Hi, I'm a noob. Please be gentle with me. But I love Final Fantasy IV. I was kind of learning this stuff. Let's do this." And immediately I was embraced by so many people that to this day are some of my best friends. And I was like, wow, these people are awesome. Okay, I really like this. So I actually had a pretty good run in the tournament. But then when I got done with it, I was just like, okay, I guess I'll just keep speedrunning the game. And so the No Creds Warp run was the first one that I really like started to sink time into it. And I got I started to, I don't want to say notoriety, but I mean that was how people kind of started to know me was through my runs of that game, and I started getting better and better and better. And I was like, okay, this is a really cool hobby. How much further can we take this? And so I was like, let me start learning other stuff. And so, I mean, obviously we can talk about the journey from there to, everything you see in my Twitch bio now, not only with all the speedruns, but also all the events that I've done. And yeah, it's been a strange trip over the last, let's call it 3.5 years.
There's a couple things I'd like to touch on there. I think it's interesting, one, that Super Metroid is one of the games that is your first one that you try something where you attempt to play a game as fast as you possibly can. One of the things that kind of blew my mind about Super Metroid running was when I was watching it like yourself on YouTube at live events, things like that. Runners make it look so effortlessly. They tell you the parts that are challenging and stuff like that. But then to actually see somebody and what the inputs are when you're playing that game, it blew my mind. And the fact that you're taking on that game, because there's a lot of R's and L's that I had no idea that was part of the game where they're pressing all these other buttons. And so it's kind of crazy that you actually, that's the first game that you're trying out. It's something that requires a lot of inputs.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't doing a lot of the same tricks and running it at the same level.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, because I would watch it and be like, okay, and try and do it. I was like, I have absolutely no clue what's going on right now. So I was like, you know what, let's just skip that strat and maybe do a little backup that, takes an extra, 6 minutes, but whatever.
I also love the fact that the thing that really hooked you was the community, because it sounds like that's the thing that made you take those next few steps. And I couldn't agree. I guess that sounds like pretty awesome. That's the way that you get into this whole thing.
Well, okay. So, and actually that's an interesting story too, because this would have been the summer of 2015. And we had just moved from where we were living before to where we're at now, which is in the greater San Diego area. And we moved down here to be closer to my wife's family, which was good, for the kids and all the things like that. But other than my wife's family, I knew no one down here. No one. And I mean, where I came from, up in the Bay Area, where I was born and raised, that's where all my family was. That's where all my friends were and whatnot. Right. So I was leaving all that behind, and doing the whole family thing. And so I was kind of out here, I don't want to say by myself, but I didn't really have anybody else. So to discover an online community that doesn't give a damn where you live was actually extremely refreshing, because I was like, oh, cool. Now I have people with which I can, communicate and have relationships and whatnot. And it's all good, even though I live in a place that I hadn't before. And so at the time when I moved down here, I was... just real quick on that, I work in the financial industry, and at one point there was a position that they wanted me to take that required me to have some state and federal licenses in order to do so. And there's a lot of studying that you need to do for that. They put me in like an isolated room in the building by myself, and I was doing all book reading and stuff online. Like, nobody was supervising me.
No Windows.
So what I did was I brought my laptop and my PlayStation 2 controller with a USB adapter, and I sat in there, and I would take like an hour and a half lunch break. I would spend 20 of those minutes eating, and the other hour plus doing Final Fantasy IV speedruns.
This is being recorded, right, Vanni? Just
I no longer work at that. I no longer work for that company, so
cool,
that's fine. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I had time to kill, and I was like, I want to kill this time speedrunning. I was like, I feel like I can actually pour something, into developing skills, into a hobby, something I obviously really enjoy and I'm really getting into. And it was just a perfect storm. And from there, like, that's what really kind of created the foundation for me learning how to do that speed run. And like I said, I kind of just took off from there.
Do you mind if we touch on that for just a moment? So one of the early episodes I did was with Gelsrick, and we were talking about balancing, having a family, having a career, and also speedrunning. And it's one of the things that intimidated me, to be honest with you, going in. I was very dedicated, still am dedicated to my career, and I love spending time with my wife. Like, how do I find time to do this? And I noticed that you stream around the same time I stream, so we're up late at night, and I'm curious, how have you found it, how to balance all of that and actually do speedruns at a very high level?
Well, the balance is that the reason why I stream so late at night is because the kids are in bed.
Right.
And, I mean, if I'm going to get home as much as I love speedrunning, obviously I love my family much more. So if I'm going to get home from work, because here's the thing, like, my son, he's got to go to bed early so he can get ready for school. Right. My daughter is even younger. She needs plenty of sleep too. So they go to bed fairly early. So I wanted to I want to get home and spend as much time with my kids as I can, and then go stream. And also, I don't want to be like, okay, later, wife, you take care of the kids, put them to bed while I go play video games.
Right.
For at the time for 2 viewers.
Yeah.
That didn't make a whole lot of sense either. So that was the balance, was wait until the kids go to bed and then doing some streaming. And so now in the current environment, I have more time on my hands, so I've been able to pour a lot more time in. Whereas before, I was only doing streams that were maybe like 2.5 hours. Now I'm doing streams that are like 5 or 6 hours because I actually have the time to do it, and that's really awesome. So, but the balance is a delicate one, and I mean, there's a lot of people like us, dads, moms too, in the speedrunning community that have to balance that whole, the whole, for your hobby as well as for your not only your family life, but then also your career too.
Well, and we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but also you sacrifice casual gaming. There's things that you can give up as well. Like, you're not going to get to play as if you're doing the speedrunning thing. There are some, I don't know if I want to say sacrifice. You learn what you want to dedicate your time to, I think, right?
Yeah, and with this being something that I've invested a lot in, not only, money-wise, but also in time, speedrunning to me is not a chore. Speedrunning to me is not something that is laborious.
Yeah.
It is something that I deeply and truly enjoy doing all the time. Even when I get trolled, even when I get shitty RNG, like it's still something that, obviously you take the good with the bad. And the whole thing about speedrunning is, I mean, it's a hobby that I don't think I've ever put as much time and passion into in my entire life.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. Like, I probably wouldn't do it if it wasn't enjoyable. And I think that's one of the reasons you pick games that you like, and that you like. You mentioning Final Fantasy IV. Obviously, you grew up on Final Fantasy. That's the game that you enjoyed. I just think I really respect it. I think that's a pretty good point to make when you're picking a game to speedrun, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's. I'm definitely seeing the path to RPG speedrunning and stuff like that. It still blows my mind that somebody makes a choice to actually say I can dedicate hours, because like I struggle to find the time. I really want to try an RPG, but it's awesome that you can find the time to do those kind of things. Let's move this a little bit here. And did you know about the TurboGrafx 16? Was that a console you were ever aware of? And how did you discover Nutopia?
I had one growing up.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I did. And I probably got it when I was like 10 or 11. And it was cool. Well, I mean, it was I got it Toys R Us, you know.
Yep.
That's, you know, something from back in the day. And they were super cheap. I want to say it was only like $50. And so I was
Especially
like,
towards the last year or two, it was always on sale. Like there was always cheap deals for it.
I was like 60-bit console, $50. I'll do it. And so so there were a few games that I had for it. One of which was Nutopia, and I mean, I played it somewhat, but then once the Super Nintendo came into the picture, the TurboGrafx pretty much took a back seat.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that was a console that I actually had and played when it was still fresh.
That's so cool. So you're picking up the Super Nintendo. When you play a game like Nutopia for the first time, if you can remember this, were you thinking, man, this seems like the inspiration for Zelda? Like Zelda is totally based off of this game. They've taken it a different route. I'm curious.
My mental state was not well formed enough to truly grasp the beauty and grace that is the inspirational source material of Nutopia. And it was only in my formative adult years that I really was able to really kind of conceptualize exactly, you know, just how majestic it is.
One of the things that I could just go on this forever. It's wonderful. No, tell us a little bit about the casual playthrough of Nutopia, because it is one of those games that you can. It's virtual. It's still on the Wii U Virtual Console. Like right now, you could still go get the game if you want, or you know, some other way. Maybe make a legal copy of it somehow. And you know, but tell us a little bit about like the casual playthrough. How does the game work? What's it play like?
So it does play a lot like The Legend of Zelda, for those that are familiar with that. And it does have some differences, though. It is not just like a straight ripoff. The gameplay for it is somewhat unforgiving. As far you asked about a casual playthrough, that is a difficult video game, and it's but it was one that, you know, it has this very like unique charm to it, not just as like a top-down action RPG, but just in a lot of the sprite work, and the soundtrack for that game is tremendous.
It's great, wonderful.
I mean, just as an actual video game experience, it's a great one. And so it's one of the games that I remembered fondly when you know, from playing it growing up. Now, what got me into doing Nutopia as a speed run was I wanted to get involved in one of these 12-hour challenges. It's actually the one and only 12-hour challenge that I've ever done.
It's kind of crazy to do an RPG. That's not your normal typical 12-hour challenge game.
Yeah, and you know, it fit in with the particular category, which unfortunately escapes me right now. But I was like, yeah, let's do this. So this would have been back in, like end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And so I learned it and was doing it for the 12-hour challenge. And when it came to doing the actual speed run, I got a very rude awakening to just how challenging that game is. In the 12 hours that I did it, I was only able to complete one run. Because here's the thing. There were no resources, no guides, nothing for this. My only preparation was watching the world record video, taking notes, and just crossing my fingers. So the world record route has very, very little, if anything at all, in the way of safeties in it. So I was trying to essentially do this safety list because I didn't really know what to do. I didn't prepare the best for this, but for the 12-hour challenge that is. But anyway, so I learned any percent. I completed one run. My time was like 1 hour and 7 minutes, which was about, I want to say that was about like 13 or 14 minutes off world record. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is brutal. So at the time, you know, once I completed, I was like, okay, that's done. That's cool. But then, enemy, my fellow RGL TV staff member, he was like gung ho on pitching and putting together a TurboGrafx 16 block submission for, I guess this would have been SGDQ 2018.
I remember that one. I remember, yes, him being all. That's probably why the Discord came about.
yeah. And so he said, "Hey, Vanni, I know you did Nutopia for the 12-hour challenge. Why don't you submit that?" And I was like, "Okay," knowing there was absolutely no way I was anywhere close to prepared to play that game on a GDQ stage.
In front of 100,000 people, no big deal.
I was like, this guy's nuts. So I played at it a little more, and I got my time down to like a 103, and I was just like, and that was the best I could do for my submission video, and I was just like, fine, just submit it, whatever, that's cool. But then I was like, okay, if I really want to do this, then let's see what I can do to actually make this marathon viable. Because to my knowledge, I don't think it had ever been done in any sort of marathon that I was aware of.
Not that I'm aware of, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so I started tinkering with it, and I found, the Book of Revival, some safety potions, things like that, looking at the 100% route, and I was just like, okay, here's some things, and then I figured out the save and continue trick that would bring back that would bring you back to full life. And I was like, okay, now these are things that I can actually work with, and it can actually, because ripping run after run after run, because you don't know it that well, and because it's so unsafe, it gets to be a bit frustrating. But when I was actually starting to be able to complete runs from beginning to end and get those repetitions and whatnot, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get a feel for this game. So with nothing else, really planned, I was just like, all right, let's see how well we can do this. So I just started plugging away at it, and at the time, this is fun. So at the time, the world record time was, I want to say it was like 54 minutes and 6 seconds. And the second place time was 54 minutes and 8 seconds. At one point, working down, I clocked in with a run of 54 minutes and 7 seconds.
Oh, there we go.
So I split the two. I was in second place by 1 second,
Oh,
but I
man.
wedged it right in there, right?
Nice.
And so, but I mean, it was a hell of a run. I was like, oh my God, this was like, my magnum opus for Nutopia. I was like, I can't possibly do better than this. And so the next stream, that was when I was able to get the world record, which I have, which since getting that world record, I've improved it several times. But since first getting it, I've held on to it since then. And that's not because, my time is so great and nobody can touch it. It's more that nobody has tried to touch it. And so the timing of this actually this podcast, could not possibly be better, because all of a sudden there has been this surge of not only interest and runners, but also people really diving into it and trying to do some new tech, building some new resources. So like I sent out a tweet earlier today. I was like, I've been waiting to send this tweet for 2 years now, but I can finally do it. The Nutopia speedrun is hot right now. It is on fire. So get in.
Yeah.
Get in, ride this wave with me, my brothers and sisters, because this is some good stuff we've got going on right now. So yeah. And for me, because I've poured so much in the game, and we can talk about a lot of the things that I've done with it, I like to refer to it as spreading the gospel of Nutopia. I am a Jazeta's witness.
There's so much to unpack there. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, because I mean, you can see there in my bio. I've done it for Calithon. Obviously, we'll talk about our experience with that. I've done it for RPG Limit Break. I've done it for Retrothon. I've done it for the Valkyries. I've done it for I did it for what Mannix did, the Pixels for Peace. And there's plenty more that
You've also
I'm not
world
even remembering.
record during a marathon, which is
awesome,
awesome.
I did it for NLSS After Dark. Yes, yeah, where I decided to just mess around and catch world record during a marathon. And it was funny because it was maybe about 7 or 8 minutes from the end of the run, and I kind of looked at my time. I didn't even have my splits up. I just had a solo timer, and I looked at it. I was like, I think we've got something going here. And I was like, I didn't even want to say, like, I'm potentially going to get world record because I didn't want to jinx it. Yeah. But I was like, this could be pretty momentous. And then when I finally, when I got it, I was like, how could this happen in a marathon? Like, it's just wild. But
So this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about Nutopia so much, because throughout the podcast, everyone has kind of brought some hidden gems. And we had Epic Neon Ninja Monkey and I did a whole episode basically on games that I think everyone should play that you maybe have never heard of. And Nutopia kind of feels that way, although thanks to you, you're trying to spread the gospel that is a Nutopia. It cracks me up. There were some things that struck me about Nutopia that my casual playthrough of it took about 10 hours. And, you're talking about it be challenging. It was very unforgiving. So if you game over, you didn't start back at the beginning of a dungeon. You're going back to the beginning of the world. Go
to the temple. Yeah.
Go to the temple, and so there were some things that just stood in my way of. It was not it's not. I don't know if Zelda 1's an easy game. I don't know if I'd call it that, but I felt like I could play through Zelda 1 with a certain level of proficiency with that, not having played it too much.
Sure.
Nutopia didn't feel that way to me, but that's the thing I liked about it was there was interesting items you can use, and the progression is pretty linear, which is a lot of the games of the time were just kind of that way. But there's enough interesting things happening, and the artwork and the soundtrack just make the whole thing worth it. You don't mind spending 10 hours there,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a fantastic gaming experience, and the casual. Here's the thing: the casual play of it is. There's all kinds of people that you talk to all around, and they give you kinds of information because like there's things that you need to figure out. Like it's not straightforward in certain sections of the game where you should be going or what you should be doing. But some of the townspeople that you talk to, they say some weird shit, man. Like,
weird
just
shit.
these unnecessary religious references. There's a lot of Star Wars overtones in it as well, and just some of the stuff you like. It's just, but here's to me that adds to a lot of the charm as well.
Totally agree.
When you're doing the speed run, you don't worry about any of that. You just grab what you need and you just go. But yeah, so for people, so when I try to get people involved in the speed run and try to get them to understand what it's all about, the first Nutopia is it's pretty combat heavy in a lot of sections. But the nice thing is that pretty much all of the bosses in the game can be, in some cases, completely manipulated such that they're essentially trivial. So, if you know what you're doing, it can take a lot of the stress out of it there. But there's also a lot of cool like movement tech, like knowing how to do combat as quickly and efficiently as possible. Like you can really sink a lot of time into perfecting and optimizing that run. And with it being a game, because here's the thing, we talk about Super Metroid, and we can talk about other games like, Super Mario World, Link to the Past, things like that. Games that are that have like hundreds and hundreds of runners, but have been optimized down to some of the most fastidious details. To me, Nutopia was kind of more of a blank canvas, where there were optimizations to be had, but we wanted to discover them. And what my hope was that the discoveries would happen as a community, as a group, and it's not just me putting it all together, because
it's tough.
I can sit there. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I can sit there and just cry from the mountaintops like, hey, run my game and whatnot. It's really cool because it is.
Yeah.
But I can't make someone be interested. I can't make it grab someone. It needs to do that on its own. And as far as how I present it and put it out there, it needs to be done in a way that is constructive and inviting and not tedious and obnoxious. So
As I was watching you run the game, there were two things I noticed right away: that you were getting better at it with just how to move and how to the combat, and also there was some route changes. But there've been some interesting. You mentioned some interesting innovations. What are some of the things that have happened to Nutopia as far as the speedrun over the course of the last year or two?
So So I mean, as far as once I started to sink my teeth into it compared to what it was, when I first picked it up, is a lot of the a good amount of the boss strategies as far as optimizing things there. How to use the fire wand, which is essentially your main projectile weapon in the game. When it's most efficient to use that as opposed to using your sword.
There are a lot of fun to use, but yeah.
Yeah. There are lots of rooms, and this is one of the places where you can really sink time into it. There are lots of rooms in the game when you're going through the crypts, or the dungeons, if you will, that are essentially completely dark. And navigating, because you can spend 30 seconds going and picking up an item that will light up the room, and then you can spend 2 or 3 seconds lighting up each of those rooms when we get into it, but all that stuff adds up, where you can just forego lighting things up altogether, memorizing the rooms, knowing the most efficient ways around there, which is cool, not because you're saving time, but we have to remember that speedruns, I mean, the whole reason why we stream speedruns is because we want to share them with other people. And if people are going to consume them, it would be nice if they were interesting.
Yeah.
To me, it's pretty interesting to watch
someone
running around in the dark with no problems at all, making it look super smooth, and just wrecking the game in that fashion. So I poured a lot of time into that as well. So but then when it came to now this is just in the any percent portion of it. There was also the 100% category. Once I kind of had taken, really sunk my teeth into any percent, I was like, all right, let's continue to expand on this. And then went into 100%, did some optimizations there as far as, routing and things like that. And so once it had become established that, I was the preeminent speedrunner of Nutopia. My friend, her screen name is Glitchwitch, but we all know her as Kat. Another fellow RGL staff member. She and I we have a great relationship. She's a dear friend, and we love to just give each other crap all the time. So one of the things she would always harp on me about, it's like, Tony, when is low percent Nutopia? When are you going to do low percent? And for which there had not been a category defined. Right. And I was thinking about it, and it just made my head spin, because I was like, low percent would be virtually impossible, especially in certain sections. But I essentially wanted to pacify her, or I wanted to patronize her, because that's what I do.
I do.
And so I was like, all right, what if I do the entire run but without the fire wand, which is arguably the most important item you get in the game. I was like, is this even possible? And so I sat down one stream, and the second time I tried it, boom, got it all the way through. And I was like, sweet, here's another category for this game, for people that want to, make it more challenging. So that was, just trying to expand what is available there for speedrunning Nutopia was something that I enjoyed doing. But actually, so I figured we'd be talking about Calithon last year.
Absolutely.
And the experience there with Nutopia. Now, when it was at this point that I felt confident enough to submit Nutopia for a live marathon. I felt like I'd put in enough work. I felt like I was really strong with it, and so I submitted. And I remember I got a message back from one of the organizers, and he said, "Hey, looking at your Nutopia submission, and I'm really digging this game, but I have a question for you. Your capture is super clean. Are you running on emulator, or is it on a console?" And I said, well, the one that I submitted there is on an emulator. And he was like, okay, cool. Do you have this available on a console? And at the time, I said yes, because I didn't want to completely torpedo my chance of getting accepted to this marathon.
Absolutely.
So, lo and behold, Nutopia gets accepted. And I was like, well, I guess I need to buy a TurboGrafx 16 and an EverDrive and have some way to be able to play it on stream, because this is happening. And so I went on eBay and I found a TurboGrafx 16 that was hard modded for composite out. It's a beautiful mod. It's really well done.
Oh, wow.
Really reasonable as well. The controller was in pretty good shape. As you know, turbo EverDrives are not terribly expensive, so that wasn't
Thankfully,
too big of a that wasn't too big of an investment either. And then I had to and you know, when you take a game from emulator to console, especially one where there's a lot of timing and whatnot, there's a big readjustment period.
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, my gosh. It took me months.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to perfect playing playing Nutopia on the console now. And but I'm glad that it ended up working out, because that's the first ever live run that I've ever done was at Calithon. And it also, I guess, kind of helped that what time did our run start? Like about 3:30.
Yeah, it was way late or early, depending on where you look at it.
Yeah, like 3:15. And fortunately, the guy that I'm looking at right here was gracious enough to not only stay up that late.
Hey,
the fact that you had the next run after mine might have had something to do with it.
Had a little something to do with it.
But yeah, but to be on the couch was cool. Now here's the thing. I will say this, Lat, and keep this in mind. With Nutopia blowing up like it is, when it becomes the hot new speed game that everybody wants to play,
inevitable.
You, my friend, can say, hey, for the very first live run of that game ever, I had a front row seat to history.
I keep saying that I'm gonna keep wearing the Nutopia shirt until we get into Games Done Quick and
until it's threadbare. Anyway,
go.
So that was cool. Now before Calithon even happened, because Calithon was in March. After that is another annual, and I'm actually repping it right here, is a marathon called RPG Limit Break. Now, RPG Limit Break is something I had attended, so this is 2019, right? So I had attended the previous two RPG Limit Breaks, and RPG Limit Break is a marathon that means a lot to me for several reasons. First of all, the obvious, what we've already discussed, my deep love for RPGs, and that's what it's all about. The second is that a lot of the people that I first got introduced to in the community that are still dear friends of mine now, a lot of them are going to be attending the event, so it was a great way to see them. But then also on top of that is that RPG Limit Break, it is a charity fundraising marathon. And the cause that they raise money for is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is called NAMI for short. And that particular cause is one that means a hell of a lot to me, just because of my experience with mental illness. Some of what my family has gone through, friends as well. It's an extremely worthy cause, and so to be able to contribute to that and to help to raise money for that is something that means a hell of a lot to me. So submissions for that game, or for that marathon, were in January. And I had learned that Nutopia had got accepted for Limit Break before I had even done Calithon.
Oh, man.
And so while I was excited for Calithon, and not to disparage anything about that great marathon and Direct Relief and who they raised money for and all the organizers and whatnot, and I certainly was honored. And that was where I took my maiden voyage in live speedrunning, or in a live marathon speedrun, was there. But to me, I was already looking forward to Limit Break because I knew that was going to be such a momentous occasion to be on stage for that. And so the fact that our runs, I guess I'll speak for my part, the fact that my run was like 3:30 in the morning, aside from people on stage and people in the crew, I think there were like 5 people in the building. Like,
if we're lucky.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them security.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One of them just coming in to get the free pizza,
Yeah, exactly.
But it was fantastic experience to be able to have that under my belt before going into doing Limit Break. And I'm pretty sure, and and I don't have this part of it up right now. But yeah, okay. Oh, it just finished up. You're showing my.
Oh yeah, it'll repeat here in just a second. Yeah, it's actually just started back up again. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
Let's.
Yeah.
Can we hit before, because I want to get into limit break stuff too. We'll just hit on Calithon here for just a quick second, because if you haven't seen Vanni's run from Calithon, it's really damn good. There are very few mistakes at the time where your skills were at and everything, like where the run was at. Like, it was a really clean run. And on top of that, you talk, like you explain everything that's going on through it really well. And I was really impressed. On the couch, I found myself being a viewer. Like, I was enjoying so much of watching all this stuff, and it was a really kick-ass run. The other quick thing I wanted to mention about Calithon, which I found was interesting, I wasn't quite aware of all of the speedrunners in California. So I had always noticed the Lakers jerseys behind Vanni's back, so I'd always assumed, he's got to be a California guy. Little did I know, Northern California, San Diego, all those things. But meeting all of the other people who are actually in the area, who are in the Greater California area, was really a fun part of that event. One of the organizers grew up in the city next to mine. Like, we were just, all these things you find out, that's one of the things I think that I'm really missing, and I hope the events come. I assume they will. The events will come back slowly but surely. But being able to, taking that community aspect of what we do into a real live thing, it's tough to put it into words what kind of experience and how much fun and how great that is for everyone and everything.
Yeah, and to discover that there are a lot of people in California that speedrun and who are strong in the community is cool, because like, hey, these are I've been on this planet for damn near 41 years, and I have never lived outside of the state of California. Yeah, it is. I mean, this is my home. This is where I was born and raised. So that was a cool thing, to participate in an event that bears the name of my home state, and obviously one that I love so much. Was really, that was special. That was really, really cool.
Totally agree with you. Murdoch, Murdoch's a Californian. He's in the chat right now.
Absolutely.
The RPG limit break thing is so awesome. So Brosencho was actually the episode before you. So Bro talked a little bit about RPG limit break and the causes and the mental health and the personal reasons. It's nice to hear that that's one of the reasons you like participating in this event too. But the one thing that I always gets, and I have never attended, I've only watched the RPG limit breaks on the stream, but that it's like we talk about, it seems like the ultimate community hang. It seems like it's really kind of a smaller event in the live aspect of it. Pulls in a ton of viewers, but I mean, you just know the actual event itself, and that sounds like a pretty unique aspect to it at this point.
So there are plenty of people that attend Limit Break regularly that also attend the GDQs regularly. I mean, there are people like Puexel, Spike, Vegeta, J Hobbs, Kizaron, the list goes on. And so they obviously have a very strong point of reference. And so what I understand is that take GDQ and shrink that in size to about like 1/10 of what that is, and that's basically Limit Break. So to me, what I appreciate, now having never attended a GDQ, so I don't have a personal point of reference, but what I appreciate about that is that it is a big enough group that you still have like a major marathon feel, but it's also small enough that it can still be intimate as well. And I mean, and just like the GDQs, there's a good sized practice room. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Obviously practice, but races, people hanging out, all that stuff. So you still get that part of it. And the event is right there in the hotel. So you get that whole atmosphere as well. But it's so much fun. It's such a great week. And yeah, I've been every year since 2017. It was supposed to have happened about 2 weeks ago. It's been postponed to October. I'll actually be doing another run in this one fingers crossed. I'll actually be doing a run in this Limit Break as well when it does occur. So that'll be really fun. But but yeah, it's just a tremendous event, and I look forward to it every year, and for many reasons which we've discussed.
I think that's kind of a sign of an event too. Like, you attended before you even had a run in. Like, it was part. You were there's definitely something. And you mentioned finding the community there, and it's so funny because I always think of like speedrunning as like this niche thing, but we have niches inside of our niches. We've got the RPG speedrunners.
Yeah.
We got different games even have their own niches and stuff. It's awesome that all these places exist, and whatever thing you want to experience, there is a community for you here. Which I think is really awesome. And RPG Limit Break being so inclusive, obviously, is another just real great aspect to it, to say the least.
Certainly.
What are you running in this year's Limit Break?
I'll be running Willow any percent.
Okay, another speedrun I've been watching your stream on and grinding up. That's a fun little game.
So we kind of touched on it, but I did want to talk about the actual run of Nutopia at Limit Break last year. So what was interesting with that is, and you mentioned, it was a clean run, is that I had submitted Nutopia any percent because the vast majority of the work that I'd put into the game was to the any percent category, and 100% was kind of just something I'd gotten the world record, but I just kind of kept that on the side. But I otherwise didn't have any donation incentives. So after the fact, I went to one of the event organizers and said, hey, we can do an incentive to, I guess, quote, upgrade the run to 100%.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, cool, we'll take it under advisement. Well, sure enough, they put it in there, and it gets met. And I'm like, I need to practice 100% now because I haven't put that much time into it. So I really poured a lot of time into it in the practice room there, and I must have had at least 3, 4, maybe 5 runs that were better than the world record that was posted on SRC. Like, I really hit a groove, and I was like, okay, here's the deal. There's the very real chance that I could have a recorded world record for Nutopia 100% at RPG Limit Break. And imagine submitting that as your VOD for SRC. And so I was dead set on doing it, and I missed it by about a minute. And so I kind of knew throughout the course of the run. See, and here's those things. For those of you, I don't know if you've ever done any like performance art, like singing, acting on stage, anything like that. One of the big things that they tell you is that if you screw up, there's a lot of things that you can do to make sure the audience doesn't know that you've messed up. You can make it super obvious, or you can just roll with it. And, kind of finding out how to do that is a very particular skill. So that's something that I was able to do with the speed run. Was there were things where I was just like, oh my God, this is so, by my standards, for me, I was like, oh my God, this is so sloppy. But for, the 12, 15,000 people that are watching on Twitch, they would have no idea unless I indicated to them that I was messing up. Mm-hmm. So I was continuing to roll with it. So, but I'll tell you that I'm trying to think of a more kind of just exhilarating release of energy that came with me pointing to the tech table and saying time at the end of my run.
Heck yeah.
And I got to give a big shout out to the community there, and especially my friends, because for a TurboGrafx 16 that is kind of a stretch to say is an RPG.
That's true.
To have that room be, I mean, it was standing room only.
You got a great time, yeah. You can see it's all packed. I mean, you watch the video right now; it's all packed in the video right now.
It was packed, and it was loud in there.
So cool.
So the fact that my friends came through so strong, and when I said time, and just the roar that came up in the room, it is literally a sensation. Not just how I felt, listening to it, but just the physical sensation of all of that is something that I will never ever forget.
It's one of the things that if I think you get actually nowadays because they're miking the rooms and things like that. You do get a sense of the room a little bit watching the stream at home. But there's being in the room is something. It makes it worth going attend events. I always tell people, look, even if you're not running or volunteering, go to these events. When they're actually around. But there's just something, especially if this is your into, like we're all into video games. We're geeking out. We're nerding out. It really there's a great vibe to it, to say the least, and it's pretty awesome.
The vibe in there was indescribable. Indescribable,
right.
That. Yeah.
It was fun to watch at home. I'll tell you that, and it wasn't just because I'm seeing this console that nobody, not a lot of people have heard about. That's part of it. But then just seeing, obviously, everyone's reacting like for real reactions. It's pretty awesome.
But we talk about history with this game, and obviously to this point, but Nutopia was the one and only. So it was the first ever TurboGrafx-16 game that's ever been run at an RPG limit break.
That is awesome.
So there you go. There's a little slice of history right there.
Yeah, I got to learn the library a little better, but I don't even know if there's any turn-based like traditional RPGs on the console. I'm not sure there is.
And you know this, that when it comes to the library of games, especially that we got here in North America, it's nothing compared to what was released in Japan.
Right.
So
totally true.
And then of course when we go into
ease.
But then when we go into the CD games and things like that, then there's more of a library. But that's not really what the TurboGrafx-16 was all about, So any RPGs that come on there is, it's obviously something I was going to seize upon.
No, totally. There is a Nutopia 2 for the TurboGrafx. The US and Japan got it. Yep. What are some of the differences, or did they improve upon anything? How does it? I haven't played through the game yet, so I'm speaking totally blind here. What changes? Yeah. What happens in Nutopia 2?
So what happens in Nutopia 2, and just real quick lore wise, so the protagonist in that game is actually the son of the main character from the first one, and part of what you need to do is you need to go out and find your father. So,
of course.
So that's where the story kind of picks up, and so it takes place several years after the events of the first one. Now, what's different as far as just the gameplay itself of Nutopia 2 is, first of all, you can move diagonally, which is something you couldn't do in the first one.
Nice.
And also there is definitely a much more varied arsenal of weapons in that game. So you do, when it comes to combat, you have a lot more options, and there's definitely more depth there. Now, as far as the speed run goes, first of all, it's definitely longer. So my world record for Nutopia 1, and 100% is the comparison point here. So my world record for Nutopia 100% is, I want to say it's like 52 minutes and change. And my world record for Nutopia 200% is 1 hour, 11 minutes and change.
Oh,
so
wow.
An extra 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Okay. That's another thing about Nutopia 2. It is completely linear. You had some kind of leeway as far as which crypt you would go to in each of the spheres in the first one. But in the second one, you do everything in order. Now, the two big differences from Nutopia 2 as compared to Nutopia 1 is that, especially in the early part of the game, the RNG that you need from enemy drops, the items that they drop, are crucial to being able to complete the run. Whereas you do need drops in Nutopia, but it's not nearly as critical as it is in the second one. The other big difference, and this is actually something that I touched on when talking about tech for Nutopia, is that pretty much all of the bosses can be, in some cases, completely manipulated and trivialized. Almost all of the bosses in Nutopia 2 are complete RNG fests. So it can really make or break runs, because like there's one particular boss that has has 3 different attacks that it does, and it can only be damaged when it does one of those particular 3. Jeez. Well, you have a 1 in 3 chance of that attack coming out, so you can kill that boss in as quickly as 2 or 3 cycles. I've had it take up to 30 cycles, 25 or 30 cycles, and in that case, the difference between the two is like, over a minute. So when it comes to trying to speedrun it at a high level, if you get 20 cycles on that boss, you're basically kissing any opportunity to TB there goodbye. So
when I first started watching your attempts at Neutopia 2, I actually was like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is he's not even hitting the boss because he wasn't giving you the opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, and the combat, to me, the combat in Neutopia 2 is much more fluid. And here's another difference. When in Neutopia 1, whenever you would stab with your sword, or let's say throw out fire or whatnot, you would stop in place while your sword swinging animation was going on. In Neutopia 2, you could stab your sword and continue to move at the same time. In fact, you can actually while your sword is out, you can like change direction, and the sword will go with you. So the combat, just the feel for the combat, it's much more fluid, which to me makes it more complicated, because you have the opportunity to make things go faster. You have the opportunity to make things more optimized. And, for me, running it at that level, like, I have to do that.
Yeah.
And so to be, I appreciate and love the challenge of doing it, because, again, just like the first Nutopia, it's got that charm. The graphics are great. The soundtrack totally is phenomenal.
It's great, yeah. It's got some bangers.
Yeah. It really does. And so, all the things that you love about Nutopia are there, but then there are also some differences as well. Now, again, depending on the heavy RNG factors that are not present in Nutopia 1 can be hard to stomach, but other than that, it's it's weird to say this, but it's superior to its predecessor.
I believe it. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't have very many criticisms of the first Nutopia, but one of them was, being on the straight line path and not hitting the enemy that I was trying to do, because once my sword already went out and the enemy had moved down, a pixel or whatever, you totally miss, even though it looks like you're hitting the enemy. But that got pretty could get frustrating at times.
The hitboxes suck in that game. Yeah. They really, really do. But I mean, just like anything else, you adjust to it.
You totally. And by the time you're halfway in, you're already used to it.
Yeah. But just like any other speedrun, if you can kind of just get accustomed to how those work, and go beyond, your eye. What's that line from Star Wars? It says, your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
Yes, right, exactly.
So, yeah.
Murdoch mentioned this, that one of the ways you can play Nutopia is on the the TurboGrafx 16 Mini.
Yeah.
And it brings up my other, I would say, complaint. Yeah, it's a complaint of the game. I'll say that. And that there was the password system, because the TurboGrafx 16 didn't have any sort of way at the time until you got the add-on module. There wasn't, the cards, they didn't have battery backups or anything like that. They couldn't save to the card.
Right.
But now if you play on Virtual Console, or if you play on the Mini, we have save states built in. It takes care of a big problem I had with it was the passcode is 40 characters. It's something ridiculous.
Oh,
and
it's insane.
It would take me an hour to enter. It would take me half an hour before the stream would start to enter in the passcode before I started playing.
It's pretty bonkers. So.
Both Nutopia and 1 and 2, it's got some of my favorite ending credit title music. I don't want to spoil anything, but I mean the music. Yeah. It feels like a movie when you've beaten the game, which I think is. You mentioned Star Wars, it touched upon, and there's this. You've talked. There's this mythical. I've seen your tweets. The mythical third Nutopia. That, man, if we could ever have one day. But it felt like they were conscious of cinema references, and you're mentioning Star Wars. So true. Maybe they wanted that original trilogy of.
They wanted to
games.
make it a trilogy, yeah.
Ah, man.
If someone could ever revive that would be absolutely incredible.
I wonder, somebody's got to own the IP. I wonder if it's Konami.
Well, it's got to be Konami, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's on the console. That's right. So it must, come on. We're putting come on, people go out and buy a TurboGrafx 16 Mini, put some money into it. We'll show them that we actually, might want some. This is my pitch.
Yeah. I'm sure the link for the Kickstarter will be in this, it will be in the description, right?
How do we make it happen?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Oh, man. I just looking over some of your speedrunning games, there are, it's obviously primarily RPGs, but there's also things like RC Pro and something like this. What other kind of games do you enjoy playing other than, like RPGs?
Well, here's the thing. Virtually all of the games that I speedrun were games that I played growing up. So I predominant, cool. With the exception of Civilization Revolution.
Okay.
All of the games that I speedrun are considered retro.
Cool.
They're either Nintendo, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx 16. and that's basically it. So virtually all of the games that you see me speedrun or that you see there on that list are games that I grew up playing and enjoying. The
Very
only cool. And here's the ironic thing: the only exception to that is Nutopia 2. I never played that growing up.
It's funny because that came out in the States, but I can't remember when that would have come out. I don't even remember that.
Well, I think by that time, and like I had mentioned before, by the time it had come out, the Super Nintendo had taken hold in the household, and that became, that was where we were focusing all of our playtime. So and obviously all our allowance money in buying the game, my brother and I.
Of course.
So yeah.
You mentioned that you had for Calithon and for RPG Limited, you had to purchase a TurboGrafx 16. Do you know what happened to your childhood TurboGrafx 16?
I think my parents still have it in storage. I think it still exists. It's still intact. Now, I'm sure it needs to be recapped because we all know that the inner work of the one that I have, they showed pictures of it. It looks super clean. But my original one, I'm sure, has to be recapped. Now, the nice thing about Community is that I know multiple people off the top of my head that I could send it to and be like, make this pretty again, and they'd just be like, wave the magic wand, that'll be $40, and I'd be good to go. So I'd love to have a backup, just in case this one craps out. But yeah, I mean, I've put some hard time, some hard labor into this. I'm looking at it right now, this bad boy over here.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, we kind of glossed over it, but you are a staff member at Retro Gaming Live TV, and we had Enemy On episodes ago, and I'm curious how that came about. And well, first of all, what exactly is that? And then how did that whole thing start for you?
So as far as staff for Retro Gaming Live TV, I want to say there's about 30 of us, and so we're going to be the people that are doing a lot of things, not only that you see there in the events, but also behind the scenes. So, doing the restreaming of events, doing the organizing of the events themselves, the promotion, creating the layouts, things like maintaining the RTMP server. There's a lot of names like Anthole, Evo, Kavik, Shema, the 3-2, Enemy, Toad. Concakes, a lot of the guys that have been around for a long time and do a lot of work behind the scenes. Like they are the unsung heroes of RGL TV. Like all the stuff that you see with all the replays that we've been doing for
Retrothon.
The Retrothons, yeah, that's those guys making that happen.
That's really cool.
But for me as a staff member, how I came into it was another one of the original members and a good friend of mine. He goes by, we call him Raptor, but his screen name is Velociraptor 42. He's been around with RGL TV for a long time, and he reached out to me. This would have been like right in the beginning of 2018, and he just sends me a random DM. He's like, "Hey, dude, I got a question for you. Do you know what Retro Gaming Live TV is all about?" I said, "Oh yeah, dude, I follow them. They're pretty freaking cool, dude. Yeah, what's up?" He's like, "Would you want to be a staff member?" And I was like, what? And he said, "Yeah. I guess they had a discussion, shortly before that DM, and they said, hey, we want to have more RPG speedrunners on here." And again,
cool.
That was when I was really getting into doing Final Fantasy IV and was putting some work into that. And so they said, "Yeah, we'd love to have some more RPG speedrunners on board." That's kind of like a deficiency, I guess you could say, that they had in their staff members. And so I was like, absolutely, yes. I jumped at it. And so I've been a member for about 2.5 years now.
Cool.
And it's been an awesome opportunity because there's a lot of I mean, I could list the entire crew, but just so many of the people in there are just. First of all, they're fantastic speedrunners. They're prolific. I mean, people like Toad, Bald Nate, Yelsrek. I mean, just how Glitchwitch, just how proficient they are with, just the sheer volume of speed. And Enemy is obviously in that list too.
Sure. Yeah.
The laundry list of speedruns that they have on their resume is truly impressive. And for all of them to be retro games, which is obviously something that I do pretty much exclusively on my streams, I was like, man, I feel at home here. And I mean, I've obviously made a lot of great friendships with a lot of people there that I share common interests with, in being a staff member there. It's something I'm really proud of, to be able to be a part of that group, and it's definitely an honor that I hold in very high regard, to be in a group, with names like a lot of the people that I mentioned there.
It's obviously something I'm a fan of, and I think most people who listen to this podcast will probably be aware of. Sure. All the programming to see. I think it's also been cool to just kind of watch where it's gone. I mean, Enemy talked about Retrothon kind of being your guys' premier event nowadays, and to see what it has done to our community, it's pretty. It gives a lot of people opportunities they might not normally have to present some really. I mean, there was an X68,000 block with Jorf this year. I mean, this is like just some really interesting, sometimes off the beaten path type stuff. But we all share the same affinity, I think, for the retro stuff, which is I think one of the things that ties the whole thing together, which I think is really cool.
I have described Retrothon as essentially being RGL TV's WrestleMania.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's a good analogy.
Yeah, so yeah, RGL TV is to that what the WWE is to WrestleMania. And it's just, the growth that event has had. Right. I mean, and even still, the interest that people have in just us running replays of it. It's such a unique collection of speedrunners and, just the showcase itself that, I mean, sure, you get retro stuff at things like, RPG Limit Break and ESA and the GDQs and all of those things. But for people that just love the retro games, to have a week that just straight up celebrates that all week long is, I mean, it's like an absolute cornucopia for people in that niche. And anybody that's in that niche are people that I appreciate dearly, obviously.
Totally agree. And it's also, I know this is now months ago, maybe it's even a year ago, you opened up the stream team so people can, use that tag if they're doing the streaming thing. Just it's a really, and this is my thing about RGL. It's always, it feels inclusive that way. It's like, you're not limiting yourself or anything. It's nice. It's really cool. It's good community.
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned that, because while being a staff member does still have its kind of exclusivity, I think is the best word for it. The fact that we opened up Team RGL TV to anybody that is a fan of it and that wants to, use that team for their stream tags and whatnot, I think kind of speaks to that whole community thing, where we obviously know there's a lot of people that are big fans of this whole niche of the retro gaming, and for them to be able to take it one step further and kind of have that badge, if you will, that they can attach to their stream, is just something that just brings in more people and, kind of spreads all of that love and all of that passion around to, to all the corners of Twitch and the inclusivity of it is, especially when compared to how some other retro collectives were handled, or I suppose mishandled is the best way to put it. The focus on the inclusivity of retro gaming live TV is something that I truly appreciate, and obviously the effort that we put into it is something that hundreds of people in our community have recognized.
No, I'm glad you mentioned it, and I'm not afraid to shy away from it, because I think that it's nice to see what the community can do together. I think that we people have, if you want to see some of the things that we're talking about, drop by my stream. I'm totally willing to talk about it. But there have been some communities out there that don't represent us, and kind correct. Of. That's not, especially if you go to any event, or if you even stopping by many great, communities on Discord, you'll see what the community, in my opinion, what the community is about and those kind of things. And I think that's one of I like that RGL made a conscious choice and was very public about it. Like that we're doing this for this reason. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah. It's not always easy to do some of those things. So, that's pretty awesome that you've come that far, like, and RPG speedruns, started picking up Final Fantasy IV. Where can people find that Twitch stream if they want to?
Oh, so it is twitch.tv/Vanni, Vanni. It is VANNI_VAN. So yeah, please do give me a follow if you enjoyed what you listened to here. Want to see the stuff that I was doing, want to see kind of the retro things and whatnot. But
did you ever think you would get to 1,000?
Well, so here's the deal. You see a lot of people on Twitch that have a bunch of followers and a bunch of viewers, and they're playing stuff like Call of Duty and Fortnite and Overwatch and League of Legends and things like that. And like a lot of these modern things aren't my jam. What I do is extremely niche.
Oh yeah,
it's extremely niche in the grand scheme of things. So the fact that things like Retro Gaming Live TV, RPG Limit Break, things like that have allowed me to have that kind of exposure and have the eyeballs on me that have allowed someone that does humbly what I do to get to over 1,000 followers is something that it's not something that I take for granted. It's something that I deeply appreciate, and for that reason, I always have that level of respect and that level of kind of deference to those organizations, because while it is something that I get a lot of personal that gives me a lot of personal pride and joy to be able to contribute to them, because they're things that I appreciate greatly, but just the things that they have done for me in return as far as my stream goes and my efforts as a speedrunner is really special. And again, like I said, it's something that I do not take for granted, and it means a whole hell of a lot to me.
I've mentioned this before, but I attended TwitchCon at GDQX, and you realize, so speedrunning, games done quick, our biggest event is such a small, tiny fraction of a portion of what actually happens on Twitch. Let's drill down even further. So TurboGrafx-16, Nutopia, these are niches of niches of niches, and so super impressive, and big congrats that you find an audience who appreciates some of this stuff.
Yeah, when you're talking about drill down, yeah. So to speedrun Nutopia is something that's like, I mean, it is in like the darkest recesses of the corners of live streaming video games. The fact that I have been able to take that and make of it what I have, and to gain the following and the notoriety, to this point that I have, primarily from that game, is nothing short of astounding. So I owe a lot to the video game of Nutopia as well, because it's I don't think I would be where I am without it as far as streaming goes. Because that's the one that has really taken off and has meant so much to me.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and this is actually maybe a word of advice or a call to action for people. So I didn't see anybody playing Bonk's Revenge or any Bonk games. I didn't see any TurboGrafx-16 on Twitch when I started watching Twitch around 2014, 2015. Yeah. And so I was thinking, well, you know what? If it's first of all, it's the game I wanted to speedrun, because it's a game I love. Bonk's Revenge. It's in my top 10 of favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
But then as I started playing it, and Great John started running the game, and some other people, like just taking ownership of finding your own community, there's something to be said for that. Like yourself, like you didn't see anybody else running Nutopia, or there was one runner on the leaderboard, but I'm not sure if that person was streaming or anything like that. There's something to be said for just taking some ownership and driving that path yourself to try to find your community.
Well, and see, and that's the thing, is that because there have been so many other existing and established communities that have taken me in for the various games that I've done. Big shout outs to the Star Tropics community, my people there, like Terex, Bug Doctor, Zarek, just to name a few. Yeah. Just a Hobo Jim, folks like that are all people. Man, when I came into that community, they embraced me so strongly, and I was like, oh man,
that's cool.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna learn this game, because the people here are awesome, and they're just nice to you. They're helpful, they're encouraging, all those things that make a community great. And all the things that have given me such positive feels about being a speedrunner with these communities, if I am able to be at kind of the epicenter or the nucleus of creating a community of Nutopia and able to bring more people in and have that really take off, would be it would kind of feel like giving back or paying it forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Because all these communities that have taken me in and have shown me so much love and have helped me out with this hobby that obviously I have a deep passion for, if I am able to be the one that provides that to other people, how much that would mean to me is indescribable. Like, there's no way that I could properly quantify how much that would mean to me.
Well, Vanni, I'll be watching. So I appreciate you giving me the time and everything like that, and taking a deep dive into. If you haven't played the game, give it a try. If you know who Vanni is, you probably have. But it's a real. Try any. I mean, just go out and it's one of those hidden gems. And thank you so much for sharing everything and telling us a little bit about your approach and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I absolutely, I really appreciate you having me here. Obviously, sitting here and having a conversation with you is something that I was looking forward to, because I knew we would have some great things to talk about. But this is a lot of fun, lad. I really do appreciate you bringing me on here.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, subscribe, leave a review. All those things go a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter @LatMackey, or you can also join the LatMackey Discord, where we have a sequence break channel. We talk about guests, we have questions. It's really interactive, really fun. Please feel free to stop on by. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.